Okay, so like imagine you're uh, putting together this huge, massive Lego set, but instead of like a pirate ship or something, you're building a city. Culiacán, to be exact. And you'd think you'd have total freedom,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then you find this super detailed instruction manual. That's kind of what we're looking at today. Culiacán's construction regulations.
That sounds thrilling.
I know it might not sound like the most riveting topic, but trust me, this stuff gets interesting.
Yeah, it's true. These regulations are way more than just like, don't build a skyscraper out of toothpicks. It's
Yeah.
actually kind of fascinating how much detail they've considered.
Right. It's like we're talking about the DNA of the city here. This document lays out the blueprint for everything, sidewalks to streetlights to, I don't know, even those air conditioners sticking out of windows. We're going deep on how a city actually functions.
Yeah, what's interesting is the document doesn't just like jump into the nitty-gritties, you know?
Yeah.
It starts by setting the stage with public spaces.
Okay, so set the stage for me.
Well, take something as simple as a street address. You wouldn't think there'd be pages dedicated to that, but there are. Very specific rules on how those addresses should be displayed, like ensuring visibility and consistency across Culiacan.
Huh. So it's all about making sure things are in order.
Exactly. It's about creating order within what could be a chaotic urban landscape.
That makes sense. But what about like temporary structures? You know, those little shops or stalls you see pop up sometimes?
Oh, yeah, those are covered too. There are rules about occupying those public spaces even for a short time. It's about finding a good balance, you know, balancing the needs of businesses with pedestrian access and safety and all that.
Yeah. Wow, they really thought of everything. But let's go deeper, literally. What about all that stuff we don't see every day? The underground utility lines and power grids and all
Wow,
that.
the hidden veins and arteries of the city. Yeah, it's all carefully mapped out. Telephone lines, streetlights, even those air conditioners sticking out of windows. There are rules for how and where those are installed. Just imagine the chaos without those guidelines.
It really makes you think about what's going on beneath the surface of things, right? All those connections we rely on every day. But let's shift gears for a second and talk about safety. Because if we're talking construction, that's got to be top of mind.
For sure, and these regulations really take it seriously. There are entire sections dedicated to safety, especially fire safety. We're talking like super specific details, you know, the number of fire extinguishers you need in different types of buildings, emergency exit plans, even mandatory fire drills.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about preventing fires, but making sure people can get out quickly and safely if something happens.
Exactly. It's about thinking ahead and considering all the what ifs.
Right. Which makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And I guess this is where those building classifications come in.
Yeah, exactly. That's where things get even more interesting.
Okay, so building classifications, break it down for me.
Basically, it's about categorizing buildings based on their potential impact. You've got low-impact buildings and high-impact buildings. A small bakery, for example, would be considered low impact, while something like a factory would be high impact.
So it's about how much a building affects its surroundings, basically.
Exactly. And those classifications determine how strict the regulations need to be.
So a bakery's daily deliveries wouldn't exactly stress the system, but a factory with constant heavy trucks coming and going would.
Right. It's a way to adjust the rules based on the potential risk and the burden on the city's infrastructure.
And I'm guessing this is where we get into those incredibly specific details, the stuff that makes these regulations so fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. For instance, there's a whole section on the food industry, and I mean everything, tortilla factories, ice cream production, all of it.
Now you're talking, tell me more about these foodie regulations. What kind of stuff are they looking at?
Well, food safety and hygiene are obviously crucial, but it goes beyond that too. They think about waste disposal, proper ventilation, even noise levels, all tailored to the specific needs and processes of each type of business.
So it's about protecting public health, but also being considerate of the surrounding neighborhood.
Exactly. It's about the big picture and all the ways these things connect.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Did you find any details that were particularly surprising?
Oh, there were plenty. One that comes to mind is the regulation about the minimum size of a bathroom in a gas station.
Wait, really? There's a rule about that?
Yep. It has to be at least 4.20 square meters.
Wow, okay. So they really have thought of everything.
It might seem like a small thing, but it reflects a commitment to accessibility, ensuring that even those quick stop places are usable for everyone.
That's a good point. It's those small details that often reveal the bigger picture. Speaking of the big picture, what's the overall goal here? We've got all these rules and regulations, but what are they actually trying to achieve? It's like we're looking at the recipe for a city, right? All these ingredients. have to come together in just the right way.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance, making sure the city can grow and evolve while still being safe and livable.
Right. So it's not just about avoiding problems. It's about actively creating a better future. And speaking of creating a better future, we talked a bit about environmental sustainability. What are some of the things Culiacan is doing to make this city greener?
Well, they're definitely thinking ahead. The regulations go beyond just encouraging things like recycling and composting. They actually promote sustainable building practices, like using energy-efficient materials and incorporating green spaces into their designs.
So it's about finding ways to have both beautiful buildings and a healthy environment.
Exactly. It's about that balance again.
Makes sense. But what about those things you can't always predict, like natural disasters? I know Culiacan has to deal with those from time to time.
Unfortunately, yes. They've got earthquakes and hurricanes to think about. But that's where these regulations are really important. They have specific guidelines for things like seismic design and flood prevention, making sure buildings can withstand those kinds of events.
So they're not just reacting to disasters, they're actively planning for them.
Exactly. It's about building a city that's resilient.
That's really impressive. It sounds like they've thought of everything.
Well, they've certainly tried. And it's not just about individual buildings either. The regulations also address broader urban planning goals, like promoting walkability and reducing reliance on cars.
So it's about making Culiacan more pedestrian-friendly, too. That's fantastic.
It's all connected. Less traffic, cleaner air, a healthier population.
This has been a really eye-opening conversation. I used to think of building codes as kind of restrictive, but now I see them as a way to create a better future.
I think that's a great way to put it. These regulations are really about potential.
It makes you appreciate all the thought that goes into a well-designed city.
Absolutely. It's easy to take those things for granted. But there's a lot happening behind the scenes.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Culiacan's construction regulations, what's one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this?
I'd say it's the idea that even something as seemingly ordinary as building codes can tell us a lot about a city's values and priorities.
That's a great point. It's a reminder to never stop questioning and exploring the world around us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.